Hello you guys, Professor Pascuagon here, your resident geographer, and welcome to a brand new episode of One Piece Geography 101. Today we'll be talking about the geography of Baratie, which is not just where we first meet Sanji and Seth and of course Hawkeye Mihawk, but it is also, in my opinion, where Oda first really starts having a lot of fun with his geography and his world building, and therefore that means that in this video we are going to be able to explore some of the more exciting details about the world of One Piece in a way that we really haven't been able to do in the past few videos. Alright, so let's get right into it. So just for a little bit of context, Baratie is located between the Gecko Islands, which is where we find Syrup Village, of course Usopp's village, as well as the Konomi Islands, which is where we find Kokoyashi Village, which is Nami's village, as well as Arlong Park, which is coincidentally the next location that we're going to be looking at in this video series. Nice. So if you don't want to miss my upcoming video on the geography of Arlong Park, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the little notification bell on the side. But anyways, it is important to consider that Baratie isn't located directly between these 2 points, but it rather curves down towards the Grand Line. And this is important because, as I'm about to explain, the plot of Baratie doesn't really make too much sense from a geographical point of view. What? And this is because of Baratie's location relative to the rest of the world of One Piece. So as we know, the drama behind the plot of the Baratie arc only exists because Don Krieg and his armada escaped from the Grand Line, being chased by Hawkeye Mihawk, and then reached the East Blue and then reached Baratie, and of course Hawkeye Mihawk followed them all the way there. And if you know anything about how the world of One Piece functions and you sit down for a second and think about it, this doesn't make any sense. And if you need a refresher on how the world of One Piece functions, then go and watch my video in which I explain the world of One Piece. But just for a little refresher here, remember that the calm line separates all the 4 blues from the Grand Line. And what are the characteristics of the calm belt? It has no winds and no currents, therefore it is basically impossible to traverse it unless you have some form of motorized transport or some animals to carry your ship across the calm belt. And second, it is infested with sea kings, so you can only safely traverse it if 1, you are strong enough to defeat all the sea kings, which would take a significant amount of time, or 2, you have sea stone onto your ship. So for very obvious reasons, Don Krieg probably doesn't meet either of these 2 criteria. Therefore, it is impossible for him to have crossed the calm belt to reach Baratie from the Grand Line. And Hawkeye Mihawk, sure, he's strong enough to deal with all the Sea Kings, but once again, he doesn't have any form of motorized transport or any animal to carry his ship across the calm belt. So how did either of these 2 people, Don Krieg or Hawkeye Mihawk, make it to Baratie? Well, there is a second way to make this work, and that would be that they would have to go all the way across the first half of the Grand Line, being Paradise, island to island, then either go up the Red Line to Marjoa and come back down to the New World, or go down to Fishman Island and then go back up to the New World, and once again go island by island, and then reach the end of the New World, go up Reverse Mountain, and then go down onto the East Blue. So not only is this basically impossible for Don Krieg, and potentially so for Hawkeye Mihawk, but it is also known, it is canon, that the only person or the only crew to have successfully completed this whole journey around the Grand Line is Roger and Roger's crew. So once again, how did Don Krieg and Hawkeye Mihawk make it to the Baratie? This is a question to which I do not have an answer, and I honestly don't think we'll ever get an answer. Why? And this actually leads me to my first argument, which is that because Oda has built such a complex world with such a detailed geography and such a strict set of rules, that means that whenever Oda himself breaks these rules in his storytelling, I get a little sad because it takes a bit of credibility out of the stories that he's writing and the worlds that he is depicting. Now, fortunately for us and fortunately for Oda, this geographic plot hole is pretty insignificant in the grander scheme of things. And in fact, if we continue to use geography as a lens of analysis for Baratie, we will actually uncover a significantly larger amount of good things about the world building in One Piece, which is ultimately what defines it as a story. And in this specific case, what I want to focus on is how we can use real world geographic principles and concepts to better understand not just Baratie, but also the wider world of One Piece. Now, in the case of Baratie, Oda was initially inspired by this restaurant cruise in Saigon, Vietnam, which kind of looks like a fish, so you can definitely see the similarities between the two. And this leads to a wider point, which is that Baratie could very easily be a real place in our world, because there are a lot of boat restaurants in major cities around the world that border bodies of water, such as Jumbo Kingdom in Hong Kong, which I want to say closed over the pandemic, but before then used to seat over 2,000 people, which is insane. So Baratie is not an outlandish location. However, this isn't exactly what we're looking for, because obviously Baratie is out in the open sea, whilst these real world boat restaurants are actually normally near cities, or at least docked right next to cities as well. So this means that we're gonna have to dig a little deeper into our real world geography to better understand what the Baratie is all about. And we can actually start with Sanji and Seth, because as we know, the Baratie was born out of their experience with having a shipwreck and therefore being hungry for days on end on a deserted island, right? They know what hunger and starvation are like, and they wanted to build a restaurant in the middle of the sea to allow sailors, regardless of whether they're pirates or marines, to stop by and get some rest and get some food and just don't have the same horrible experience that they did. And this was, and still is, a very real issue in our world. If we think back to the 17th and 18th centuries, sailors going from Europe to the Americas had to traverse a distance of at least 6,166 kilometers, which is the shortest straight line distance between the two continents. And now I'm going to need you guys to take out your TI-84 graphic calculator or any other sort of calculator that we got around the house gathering dust, because we're about to do some math to understand exactly what this means. Because if we consider the average speed of a ship in the 18th century, which was about 5 knots or 9.3 kilometers per hour, this means that it would take a ship a minimum time of about 27 days or just under a month to traverse this distance. And in reality, these trips could take anywhere from 6 weeks, which is about a month and a half, to 3 months. Quick maths! And this is a long enough period of time for any sort of stuff to happen to lead to food shortages and starvation, such as storms and shipwrecks and mutinies, etc., etc. And Oda even alludes to this issue at the very start of the Baratie arc, when the Straw Hats run into Johnny and Yosaku, two of the best side characters in the entirety of One Piece, as we all know, and they find that Yosaku is suffering from scurvy, which is very much a real world disease that occurs because of a lack of vegetable or fruit consumption. And as we know, pirate ships back in the day and just ships back in the day really could scarcely stock up on fruits or vegetables, because you couldn't refrigerate them, they would just go bad. So evidently there are a lot of reasons both in our world and in the world of One Piece as to why such a place as Baratie should exist. And we can actually take this argument further, like significantly further, because now we're going to consider Point Nemo, which is the furthest place from land on the sea, and it is in the South Pacific Ocean at a distance of about 2,700 kilometers from the nearest island, which means that depending on the day, the closest humans to Point Nemo might actually be out in space, because consider that the International Space Station is only 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, which is of course significantly less than the distance of 2,700 kilometers from Point Nemo to the closest island. Boom! So this place is really remote, and we're just going to go into a bit of a hypothetical tangent here regarding this place. And I'm going to need you guys to take your calculators out again, because we're about to do some more math. Because if we consider the San Francisco, which is the fastest ship in the world today, it travels at about 58 knots, which is something like 107 kilometers per hour, which means that it would take about 25 hours or so to go from Point Nemo to the nearest island. Which, isn't half bad. You're not going to die of hunger in that time period, but we have to consider two things. The first is that most ships in the world today are not that fast. The second thing to consider is that, of course, back in the 17th and 18th centuries, your average ship would move at about a distance of 5 knots, which means that it would take you about 12 days to get from Point Nemo to the next closest island. Now, humans can only survive for about 3 weeks without food, or 3 days without fresh water. So if in the last 4 days of this trip you run out of fresh water, you are dead. But consider this, because if you're a sailor on a pirate ship in the 18th century, going from somewhere close to Point Nemo to the next closest island, and you're working your ass off every day and you're burning calories, and maybe you already have a bit of scurvy, your chances of survival are going to be significantly lower. So this already sounds pretty bad as it is, but it is actually estimated that from the start of the colonial period to the start of the Industrial Revolution, across the entire world, something like 2 million sailors, 2 million, that's a lot, died from scurvy and other related causes out at sea. Horrible stuff. I mean, like, really, you could have definitely used a place like Baratie out there in these conditions. So once again, lots of rationale for such a place to exist, both in the real world and in the world of One Piece. However, unlike the world of One Piece where Baratie actually exists, there really was never such a place in our real world. I really tried digging down and doing some research, and I just couldn't find a real world parallel, because ultimately, if a regular ship is already having so much trouble stocking itself up with fresh food and vegetables to make a transatlantic journey, then how could a restaurant ship out in open sea do the same? It just couldn't. So there really isn't exactly a real world parallel, but there is something close. And this next closest thing might be Tristan da Cunha, which some of you guys might know. It is the most remote island in the world, located in the South Atlantic at a distance of about 2,800 kilometers from Cape Town, South Africa. And I know that some of you guys will be all like, oh, but pascuagon, Tristan da Cunha is an island and Baratie is a ship. They're not the same. And you would be right, but also consider this, because from the 15th century onwards, the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French and the British and also one American dude called Tristan da Cunha home. And more importantly, they used it as an important location in world navigation, because remember that before the Suez Canal was opened in Egypt to connect the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean, sailors had to sail south from Europe all the way down to the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, and then over to the Indian Ocean, which was a long and dangerous and arduous journey. And this meant that Tristan da Cunha was strategically positioned as a place for sailors to stop and get some rest and eat some good food and just, recharge their energies before retaking their long and dangerous journeys and have a better chance at surviving, really. So from a utilitarian and functional point of view, we can see that despite Baratie and Tristan da Cunha not being exactly the same, they both emerged and evolved given a similar set of circumstances and needs in their respective worlds, and have both basically provided a similar set of services throughout their history. So once again, we can see how our world and the world of One Piece are really not as different as one may initially think. So yeah guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a comment down below with what you think of this video, and also what do you think about Baratie? Do you like it as a location? Do you not? What do you find interesting about it from a geographical point of view? Make sure to comment down below. I read all the comments. But beyond that, if you really did like this video, then make sure to actually like it, and also to subscribe to my channel and to hit the little notification bell on the side so you're notified whenever I upload new videos like this one. So yeah, this has been pascuagon, and I will see you guys next time.